Okay.
Thank you.
Well, good morning, and I'm really thankful, honored to do this and to be here. And for some reason, Terry didn't think I needed a microphone. So if for any reason that you can't hear me, and I'm going to drive her nuts because I pace, the ADD kicks in. My name is Maggie Hutchison. I'm the executive director of Deering House. I could start out by telling you that Deering House has been a nationally accredited child advocacy center for 18 and a half years. That doesn't tell you anything. So let me tell you a little bit. Let's pretend like this is a crime story podcast. And let's kind of walk through the process that Deering House deals with on a daily, if not hourly basis. So let's start out with that law enforcement has received a report, and they have a 6-year-old at a local elementary school that was found sobbing in the bathroom. And a highly informed, trauma-informed, well-educated, by Deering House, teacher said, this needs immediate response. And they immediately call law enforcement and make that report. And then they immediately start responding to the child's needs. So, but what happens? Where does that all go? Well, Tracy and I were already talking about acronyms. And so what we've got involved is a CAC. And at the CAC, we have an MDT. The MDT involves the LE law enforcement. It also involves DHS, child welfare. It also involves victim advocacy. And victim advocacy is not just the advocate that works for us. There are advocates that work for most agencies in town that we coordinate with. I look at teachers as being advocates. I look at teachers as being first responders. Victim advocates. We also do forensic interviews at Deering House. We also have a sane nurse, not an insane nurse. We have a sexual assault nurse examiner. We have mental health professionals, both on staff and in cooperation in the community. And we have a district attorney. Okay? So there's all of the people that are going to be involved in our crime story today. So what do all those people do, and what does Deering House do? So in order to solve a crime, you've got a 6-year-old who's crying in the bathroom, and she has disclosed that Uncle Bee-wee has touched her pee-wee. What is a cop going to do with that? What is anybody going to do with that? Okay, Uncle Bee-wee has touched my pee-pee. Okay, let's see what we need to do. But it's going to take the expertise of all of those agencies to do it, and they coordinate that through us. And so cooperation, communication, collaboration, that's where Deering House provides the unique opportunity to work with all of those agencies with the focus on the safety and the protection of that child. So multidisciplinary, that's your spelling word of the day. We call it MDT, obviously. Who wants to spell that out every day? So multidisciplinary team involves all those people. And they each bring a very unique perspective, and they each bring expertise that the others don't have. And so that's the value of the teamwork. We have a call. Let's see what we're going to do with it. So the law enforcement officer, the detective that's going to respond to that, trained by Deering House, would be able to talk to the parents, talk to the teacher, talk to the neighbors, going to gather information from adults, not going to question the child any further. We know there's a disclosure and an outcry from the child. So let's talk to the adults. Let's find out what we know about the home, about the family, about who they're involved with, who's Uncle Bee-wee. And so that's, law enforcement is also going to be looking for evidence. They're going to be looking at a timeline. They're creating a report. But they don't do that alone, because by our protocol, as defined in state statute, is joint response. So law enforcement and DHS investigate together, hand in hand, they were probably not holding hands, but side by side, because they each have information that the others don't have that's going to be beneficial in solving this crime. And so what law enforcement is going to be gathering facts and evidence. Child welfare is going to be looking at protection of the child. What is the circumstances in the home? What is the home environment? Who lives there? What previous history do they have with DHS? What other children would this Uncle Bee-wee have access to? They're looking at information differently than law enforcement, but equally important. So with that in mind, those two agencies, as they're gathering more information, they're going to call Deeringhouse and say, we need a forensic interview. And in that forensic interview, not enough coffee. Not enough coffee this morning. At the forensic interview, we gather verbal evidence. So we are able to speak with the child in a developmentally appropriate, legally defensible means that allows that child to tell their story without any influence from us or from law enforcement or for parents or Uncle Bee-wee. And from that verbal evidence that's being done our furniture is polka dotted and it's a child-friendly place. And so because the child was greeted by the other person I haven't mentioned, the victim advocate. The victim advocate is meeting with the child, playing with the child, doing some blocks and toys, and engaging that child and letting that child relax in our environment. In the meantime, that investigative team of law enforcement and DHS, they are meeting with the mom, we always tell the parent about what the forensic interview is like and what they do. Parents never see the forensic interview. The neutrality of the forensic interview is very important. The child knows exactly who's in the room and what their job is. And so we let the victim advocate and the parent sit up front while we do the interview. But what the law enforcement and DHS, trained by Deeringhouse, are able to determine from the forensic interview is that timeline. A lot of those facts that they need to know, they're getting it by watching through the TV screen, the interview of the child. And the forensic interviewer is trained to know how to speak to a 6-year-old in terminology that is understandable. We want to structure and provide a scaffolding, if you will, for the child to follow in a way that allows them to tell their whole story in their words without any influence. And so ways that we can influence a child's statement without even realizing it is those little tag phrases. He touched you, didn't he? How I did defend that in a courtroom, okay? You tell me what happened next, and then what happened next, and then what happened next allows the child's mind and the memory to replay that incident. And we get that recorded. And when she says that it happens, one of the interesting things about being the forensic interviewer, we have a forensic interviewer, Mark Bean and myself, and we oftentimes will stop the interview and go check with the team. We'll go in and check with law enforcement and DHS and see what else they need. And one time he said, I need to know the color of that blanket. The cop is asking me to ask a child about the color of the blanket? Okay, I'm not trained in law enforcement, but I know how to talk to kids. So I talk about, so she describes it's a little kitty blanket and it was on this bed and whatever else. He's writing a search warrant based on the information that the child gave in the forensic interview, okay? So that whole process of supporting the kid in the process, supporting the parents in the process. I mean, you are parents, you understand that that's a gut punch. You have just received news that your child has possibly been molested. Gut punch. You're not thinking straight. You can't answer all the questions. And so recognizing the trauma that the parents are going through is part of the way the team and the victim advocate respond. So then after we've done the forensic interview, most likely we are going to do a SANE exam. And so we're going to have the SANE nurse come and visit with the child. The thing that makes these crimes very, very hard to solve and why most law enforcement doesn't like to do these is that there's no physical evidence. There's probably, I think the national numbers, Beth Moore is our SANE nurse and she's here with us today, probably less than 5% of the time across the nation is there any physical evidence of child sexual abuse. And if you want to know the why behind that, that's a whole different timeline. It takes too much time. But what Beth can do is she is checking for evidence. There is the possibility that there was DNA left. But she is also providing wellness. She is also providing encouragement. She is sitting there with that little girl and the mom, possibly grandma, and explaining, you're fine, you're healthy, you're safe, you're going to be okay. What's the value of that? It's tremendous. So we also are working with mental health professionals in the community with agencies. We have a mental health specialist counselor on staff, and they're going to help the team know about trauma and how it affects people's memory and ability to recall and their behaviors. It's also going to be able to deal directly with the child and the family. What are the supports that child and that family need to move forward? You know, our tagline is hearing, that's the forensic interview, helping, that would be mental health and or the SANE nurse, and healing, you know, and being on the road to hope. So when we have that kind of a team working together, well-trained by Deeringhouse, and also being in cooperation and collaboration with each other. Beth is sharing with the law enforcement. Law enforcement is sharing with DHS. DHS is working with the mental health, working with the school that originally is the reporter and has this child in their care. That's creating a plan. What we want to do is that we want to prepare that case on a silver platter and hand it to the district attorney, having covered all our bases so that the district attorney can do their job, and that's to hold the bad guy accountable. So here's the situation with Maddie, the 6-year-old who with outcry at school, is that what was discovered, and of course the names have been changed to protect the innocent, and all the complicating factors that we normally deal with have been eliminated due to the timeline today. But what had happened is that a young man named Billy, who had been a longtime family friend of the parents, he was, I think, in their youth group when they were college students back home in another state, and he had come to them just within the last few days that he had, he was out of school, out of a job, looking for a place to settle, needed a place to stay for just a couple of days. They knew this young man, they knew his family. There wasn't any red flags whatsoever. They had not seen him for years. He had lived out of state. But yeah, you can, have the guest room, take the couch. Yeah, we'll help you out. And they thought it was just a wonderful thing that he was so attentive to Miss Maddie. He really liked to read books to Miss Maddie. He liked to play with her out in the yard and whatever else. And they had no way of knowing. In the forensic interview, Maddie says that, I think the first thing that she said was that Mom got mad when I wet the bed and told me that I couldn't have water. I couldn't have water at bedtime anymore. She also said that Mom and Dad really liked Billy. I mean, they laughed with Billy. They had a good time with Billy. When Billy came, they gave him a big hug. He was obviously in the fold. I mean, he was a friend of Mom and Dad's. And so when, in the course of reading a book, and it was his idea to be called Uncle Billy. He wasn't really an uncle, but he says, "Oh, honey," she said, he said I could call him Uncle Bee. And her word was Bee-wee. So anyway, Uncle Bee-wee managed to create an environment where Maddie felt safe with him, that he was fun and he was safe with him. And then he took advantage of that and touched her pee-pee. So the parents were totally unaware of that. And honestly, the parents are the last to know. And that's one of the things that moms and dads both tell me all the time, I've always told my child they can tell me anything. Well, they're not going to tell you anything that breaks your heart. They'll carry that secret. And that's why 1 out of 4, and I think now it's like 1 out of 5 boys that are molested, and the disclosure rate is about 30%, the national statistics, which I said I wouldn't tell you numbers. But the idea being that a child who believes that Uncle Billy was welcomed into the home, that he is, even just their body language was that he's a welcomed member of this family. So how can I say this and not make mom and dad sad? And so it was her behavior at school and a well-informed teacher that was the protective issue that brought this to light. And in the end, yes, Uncle Billy had an outstanding warrant from the state of Texas, and Uncle Billy was arrested, and the team was successful in providing the additional. So what we ended up with is a very safe child who knew that she was believed, who knew that she was heard. And we have a family that's more stable, and we have a community that is safer. And all of those things take place because of the expertise of all these people involved, and the fact that Deering House can bring these people into a place where we can talk to each other. And by talking to each other and questioning each other, we overcome bias, we make better decisions, and we hold offenders accountable, and more importantly than anything else is that children are safer. So I think that what I want you to know about Deering House is that we're about teamwork. And yes, we're about children, but how we most directly impact children is by the teamwork and being the hub of support for that child, so that parent has a one-stop shop to go to. They have a question about the case, they have a question about the counseling, they have a question for the SANE nurse, whatever the deal is. They have one number, and they have one agency that can help them go that way. So we value the expertise. We help develop the expertise of everybody involved. Again, the outcome is that the child is safe, the family is stable, and the community is a safer place. And this crime story is brought to you by Deering House CAC and our MDT. So I don't mind having any kind of questions that you want to ask.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, questions are perfectly fine, except from Rich. And I've been asked to repeat the questions so that that could be heard on the recording. So, sir.
Maggie, would you talk about the fundraiser you do every year to support the Deering House?
Yes, our annual event is the fish fry for the small fry. 8 years now. We hold it at Standing Bear. Standing Bear is one of our great partners. We actually have our team meetings out at Standing Bear because the size of our team outgrew our little building. But yeah, a fundraiser and community support is really essential. So we have different teams that doing fish fries. They also have everything from meats and macaroni and cheese, and the idea being that it's a family event. This third Friday in June typically, and 70% of our budget comes from state and local, state and federal funds, and that's not a healthy ratio. If you deal with any type of federal funding or state regulations, they're very restrictive. They're very time-consuming, and it doesn't give us the flexibility to deal individually with what the agency needs are or individually what the child needs are. Also, any state or federal grant that we get requires matching money. So we have to have community support. We have to have money in the community to even be eligible for federal funds, but also to be able to respond as the community needs us to respond, not how the federal government tells us we have to.
Maggie, can you share with them how wide of an area that you cover?
So by state law, each district attorney's district can have a child advocacy center. And so we serve Kay and Noble counties. And we have this same function in Noble County and Perry as we do here in Kay County. We also do courtesy interviews for other areas. We also, I mean, we're dealing with at least 10 law enforcement agencies on a daily basis. That's within our jurisdiction. And then there's Osage County and Grant County. So if a child, for instance, is living in Ponca City, but the crime occurred in Garfield County, they're likely to be interviewed at the center because that's what's easiest for the child. So we don't really have any restrictions, but by law we're defined as Kay and Noble County. We are a private nonprofit. We have an excellent board of directors, half of which are here. Markeisha Collins Dugan with DHS in the back, Mindy Meyer with the hospital, Tina Fisher is an educator, Paula Michael is a human resource specialist. Did anybody else slip in? Did I miss anybody? I don't want to miss the board members. But their dedication and recognition of the importance of what we do is really the driving force behind getting it done. So, Mindy, did you have a question?
Do you recall off the last report how many children's lives Deering has touched in the last 2 years?
We typically, it varies from year to year. Typically, at least 125 children. I think we're on the rate to be about 150 this year. We did see a reduction last year with COVID because children were not with those safe people, those first responders called teachers, amongst or others. So there was some delays. I can't think of anything else. We have a staff of 5. Myself, a full-time victim advocate, a part-time counselor, a part-time forensic interviewer, and a part-time administrative assistant. And we have our website was recently done by My Media Matters. So if you'd like to go to deeringhouse.com and check in there regularly, we try to update. One of the things that is part of our national accreditation is updating and using the research and staying current with what are the best practices in the field. And so there are a lot of training requirements. We do a lot of work with, we send everybody from these agencies to training across the country as a way of letting them stay renewed on what they do. That's above and beyond what their local budget allows. And as you can imagine, some of the smaller police departments don't have a budget to go to the Dallas Crimes Against Children conference. And so our board has made it a priority to provide training. So there's that, the training aspect of what we do, I think is an important aspect as well. So. Yes, ma'am.
Where did the name come from?
The name Deering House comes from the family that donated the building. And it was a little one-bedroom house, and it was a bachelor. Gentleman lived there, and he was a victim of Alzheimer's, and he could no longer maintain his home. And about that time, I was working for DHS. I was part of a task force with the DA's office, with the hospital, that law enforcement, that was starting a child advocacy center would be in 1997, actually. And we were looking for a location, and this one had a parking lot next to it and a really big yard. It was only a one-bedroom house, and so we were able to have a capital campaign and opened our doors in 2003 and named it Deering House after the family that donated the building.
So from a business perspective, you saw a need, you had the opportunity to create this organization. Can you talk about some of the challenges that you had in standing up this nonprofit? Can you share maybe some of the challenges that you had?
I think the same teamwork that it takes to solve this crime that we talked about against young Maddie, it's that same teamwork and community support. And so So being able to do this and being able to talk to people, I mean, what I'm looking at is that I'm hopefully educating the jury pool, because so few people understand the reality of children who are experiencing sexual abuse, witnessing. We interviewed children who've experienced sexual abuse, severe physical abuse. I've interviewed children who've seen their mother murdered. They've experienced domestic violence. So the fact that this all happens in privacy, it's very, very hard for the public to recognize how widespread, how really child abuse is a national health phenomenon. I mean, it impacts every aspect of your ability to hire people. It impacts the success of schools, the ability to buy a home. All of those things can be impacted by what's called adverse childhood experiences. And there's a huge study on ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, that says, guess what? You know it, your grandparents knew it, your great-grandparents knew it. Kids that come from hard places have a hard time reaching their full potential. So that community awareness of how essential it is that we interact and intervene and resolve, that we recognize, that we report, that we respond, and we resolve child abuse is a community issue. And so our biggest challenge is letting the community know how vital that is. Because you don't ever see Maddie. You don't know what happens to that 6-year-old who's crying at school. Her privacy and confidentiality is our top priority. I can't put a picture, with the Humane Society is a wonderful thing, and I have a rescue dog. But sad puppies, if you look at the TV commercials, oh, this little puppy doesn't deserve to be abused. Well, I'd like to put little Maddie's face on there and say, little Maddie doesn't deserve to be abused. But we can't do that. And so there's our challenge, Dawn, is that how is it that we can help the community understand how vital it is what we do, not only to start the nonprofit, to sustain this over time.
What are other things the community could do to help?
So other things the community can do, thank you very much for that question. We would rather spend money on counseling and training for the law enforcement or district attorney's office. And so reams of copy paper, rolls of stamps, packages of toilet paper. We make sure that we have, Capri Suns and Juicy Juice and crackers and, any little wrap snacks, pop, coffee, all of those things that sustain us on a daily basis. If I don't ever have to go to Staples because the community has provided all that we need in the way of copy paper, then that's money that goes into the team and into kids. So those kind of in-kind type of things are always welcome. Any paper goods, office supplies. They're many times, one of the things that's most significant about our fundraiser is that we have a number of board members and volunteers that are Phillips 66. And so we almost double what we make on the fish fry because of the matching money from corporations. Sponsoring the event is a very important way to, we're just very, very, our board has a very, very high standard of how much money we spend to raise money. So we want to spend a little bit and have you all match that. So.
I just want to interject as a board member, Maggie, and one thing you can also do is attend the fish fry.
Yeah, yeah. Buy tickets to the fish fry, sponsor the fish fry, come to the fish fry. Yes. And like I said, if you'd like to, it makes more sense when you see the building. And so if at any time that you want to walk through and see how it works, honestly, I guess I'll drop this on the board right now. What we're really going to need soon is a bigger building. So anyway, if you want to come see the building, you want to come see us, you want more information, happy to call. Left a few things and some cards on the back table. I appreciate y'all very much. Thank you for this opportunity.